Hi and welcome to my video. Today I'm doing a review of the book Love's Executioner and Other Tales from Psychotherapy by Irvin Yalom. So I recently reread this book. My first time reading it was in 2018 when I first started my counselling and psychotherapy training, and I just felt well overdue a reread for this because I knew that I loved it the first time and I just wanted to see how it held up and how I still felt about it. So I think I'll start by telling you a little bit about this book. My copy is super battered. I've dropped it in the bath before, it's just a mess. So this book is written by Irvin Yalom. It is a non-fiction piece of work, and in which he goes through 10 stories of his therapeutic endeavours with 10 clients. So these are all long-term clients. Some of them maybe for a few months, some of them were for years, and he explores his relationship to them and basically just what happened in these therapeutic encounters, in these therapeutic relationships. And when you just say it like that, it sounds kind of dry. It doesn't sound particularly interesting, but honestly, it's so well done. Yalom has such an amazing, ability to write, and he's just, really engrossing. And these tales read more like stories. They don't read like non-fiction, like, oh, this is what I did, or then that's what I did. It reads way more like a fiction story. That's why I just think it's so accessible for anyone. So even if you're not a therapist, or even if you're not a client, or even interested in therapy or ever approaching therapy, you can definitely still read this book. And I highly recommend you do, because it makes you think about a lot of stuff. It really raises some questions for you. So this book was published in 1989. So I'll tell you a bit about Irvin Yalom. So Yalom is a psychiatrist, but he offers psychotherapy to his, what he calls patients, but I would call clients. He's an existential psychotherapist. So if you don't really know what existentialism, I've printed off a definition here to explain very briefly what existentialism is. So existentialism is a philosophical theory or approach which emphasises the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent determining their own development through acts of will. So if you ever hear someone saying that they're having an existential crisis, or they're in the midst of an existential crisis, that's usually referring to this sort of philosophical perspective. Usually people, when they have sort of midlife crises or quarter life crises, it's an existential crisis, when you maybe feel like you don't know where your life is going, a loss of meaning, direction, death anxiety. As you get older and your children get older, your morality comes into play. You start to realize that you're gonna die at some point. Those are also existential issues. I think it's particularly relevant now, especially in COVID, where everything feels a lot slower, or for some people even like it's just paused. So the whole idea of having an existential crisis feels a lot more relevant when our usual sort of daily functioning and our usual goals in life have been stopped. So it's just an interesting theoretical perspective, and it does come into play in this work. But I think even if you're not familiar with psychotherapeutic theory or philosophical perspectives, it doesn't mean that you can't read this book, because Yalom writes in a way that is very accessible. He will explain all the terms he uses in a way that doesn't feel condescending. It just feels like he's talking to you, so that you can understand what's happening. You might put more meaning into things, or have a deeper understanding if you are more versed in those topics. But if you're not, if you're just like a normal person that's just like, oh, this looks interesting, then you'll definitely be fine understanding it. So I thought I wrote a list of some reasons why I think you should read it, and then also a list of reasons why I like this book. So reasons why I think you should read it is that it's something a bit different. Like, it gives you a perspective on sort of something that is quite, popular and normal, especially in some countries where they really popularise like having a therapist and therapy. It kind of really puts a more grounded perspective in it, because especially in the media, I think we get huge misrepresentations of therapists. They're always either portrayed like the stoic sort of Freudian person, or they're like hippies and it's just like not the reality really, is it? And so I feel like this gives you a really grounded perspective from a therapist's point of view of therapy and of that relationship and what it's like. It's quite humorous at times. Yalom is like the most human person ever in it. He's not scared to write his flaws. The lighting is so weird right now. I think that's a bit better. The lighting was going really weird because it's just so dark at the moment. Ugh. Anyway, so the writing is very, very very humorous at times. It's very moving at times. There's times where, even though my reread, I still teared up in certain sections. I don't want to talk about the stories because I think you need to experience them yourselves. But yeah, so if you're looking for something that's kind of funny at times, that's heartwarming, and that makes you think, this is a good book. So some of the reasons why I really like this book is that I think I've already mentioned how human Yalom is, but I think he's unapologetically human. He's a deeply flawed person, just like every other human on the planet. And I think sometimes, especially very famous figures in like the psychotherapy world, or even just in general, someone that's such a big, famous, influential figure, they can kind of like seem like infallible at times, and they just seem, I don't know, superhuman. And I still kind of think he's a bit superhuman. But he's also, his way he writes is makes him seem way more human. He has biases, he makes mistakes, and he doesn't get things right all the time. And I don't always agree with things he says or thinks. But he doesn't like try and convince you to agree with him. He just shares his experience, and if you disagree, then that's fine. You know, it's kind of like having a conversation with him, really. It's a bit strange, but it's super, super interesting. And I like that he's more human. Like when you think of, speaking of like the therapy world, when you think of Freud, he just seems like this crazy, like, I don't know, superhuman figure, because he's like the father of psychotherapy, whatever. Obviously he's super flawed, you know, but he just like, they're so like, they just seem so big, and like, I don't know, the way they're written about it and the way they wrote are so, I don't know, just so big is the word I can think of. Whereas Yalom feels a lot more human in his writing, and I appreciate that. And I love a bit of like, I don't know, honest human flaws in people's work. For me as well, I feel like it gives me so much to think about, this book, not just in terms of like therapeutic practice, just in life in general. The way he explores these encounters with clients and these topics, it does make you think about yourself. And I think that's what's really good about work where it's so specific, it's so personal to him and to his clients, but it becomes relatable to you, doesn't it? And suddenly it becomes way more understandable. You're really able to relate to some people, or some people's behaviours. And it just feels super relatable. And there's so many things that make you think, even things about like how maybe you view death or life, or the meaning you put on life, or how people cope with, like, I don't know, terminal illness, or how they feel about things, or how you would want to deal with those sorts of situations. And one thing I absolutely love, it has one of my favourite quotes of like all time in this book, is when he talks about communication and how difficult it is to connect with the other, because when we have the way we think, our thoughts, our feelings are so abstract that in order to put them into words in our head, to eventually put them into words in our mouth, it loses some of its magic, or some of its meaning, and some of its rawness. So when we connect to the other, it's just so difficult. And that just really struck me. In fact, I'm going to read the quote because I think it explains what I'm trying to say a lot better than I am explaining it right now. So this quote it's in the book, but it's actually a quote from, it's called Madame Bovary, and it's Flaubert's Lament. Okay, and it says, "Whereas the truth is that fullness of soul can sometimes overflow in utter vapidity of language. For none of us can ever express the exact measure of his needs, or his thoughts, or his sorrows, and human speech is like a cracked kettle on which we tap crude rhythms for bears to dance to, while we long to make music that will melt the stars." And I think that is just a beautiful quote. My horribly flawed reading of it does not do justice. It just expresses the difficulty in connecting to other people and what it's like we're such full, creative, imaginative beings. We have so many wonderful images in our mind, and thoughts and feelings that are so just like instinctual and innate, that getting them like cycled into thoughts and thought into speech is just so difficult, and it just like misses the point. And in therapy, you try to come close to that. Part of the job of the therapist is to try and bridge the gap between that, so that you can connect and understand what's happening to the person. But it's just kind of like, it's not going to fully happen. You can't, it's just not possible. And I think that quote just expresses just like the beauty in humans, and being able to think that way, and being able to have these beautiful thoughts. And art is a way that people try to express this thing, don't they? They try to express the feelings through imagery, but it's also it sort of expresses the isolation that we feel as individuals that are you know, sort of always in search of connection, whatever that may be, whether it's connection to other people, to objects, to music, to art, to poetry, whatever. It's just, I just think it's beautiful. And the way he writes is beautiful, and I just can't recommend this book enough. I haven't really talked about like the content because I think you should experience it for yourself. It's not a difficult read really, but it's just so beautiful and very human, and it's just so interesting. But yeah, I highly recommend. It's 5 stars. It was 5 stars back then when I first read it in 2018. It's 5 stars now. So yeah, that is my review. Thank you for listening. I hope it wasn't a horribly messy or just like repetitive review. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading, and I'll see you around.